The collapse was public. The silence afterward, deafening. Lewis Hamilton sat in his car longer than usual after finishing 12th at the 2025 Hungarian Grand Prix. Still helmeted, still processing. The driver who once dominated the Hungaroring like a personal playground had just been eliminated in Q2, failed to make a single pass in the race, and exited the paddock without speaking to the stewards, to fans, or even to Ferrari personnel. The world called it a low point. But what if that was only the surface? What if this wasn't just a driver losing pace, but a psychological unraveling at the highest level of motorsport? And what if, right in the middle of that unraveling, Toto Wolff stepped back in? Not as a team principal, but as something far more powerful. The one man in Formula One who still sees Hamilton as a weapon waiting to be reloaded. Because what Wolff sees isn't just loyalty, it's opportunity. A new set of regulations coming in 2026, reduced car dimensions, a 50-50 internal combustion to electric power split, and an aerodynamic philosophy that rewards driver instinct over downforce dominance. That reset? It might be Hamilton's last, best chance to flip the table one final time. And Toto knows it. If Lewis is given the right tool, he can rewrite the script that ended in controversy at Abu Dhabi 2021. But if not, we may be witnessing the start of the final chapter. Because for the first time in over a decade, the man who once radiated certainty is now whispering doubt. Hungary didn't just test Hamilton's pace, it exposed the cracks in his foundation, and if Ferrari doesn't fix them soon, Formula One might lose one of its greatest before the story's truly over. Lewis Hamilton's heartbreak in Hungary wasn't just another disappointing weekend, it was the culmination of a steady erosion that's been building since the first lap of the 2025 season. Let's rewind. After years of dominance at Mercedes, Hamilton's move to Ferrari was supposed to be the final chapter in a legendary career, one fueled by unfinished business, the ghost of Abu Dhabi 2021, and a burning desire to make history in red. Early winter testing hinted at promise, but that optimism didn't last long. While Charles Leclerc gradually found a rhythm, 5 podiums, a pole in Hungary, and consistent top 5 performances, Hamilton's trajectory nosedived. There were moments of brilliance, a P3 in Bahrain, a strong charge in Suzuka. But those flashes only made the lows feel lower. Imola, Spa, Silverstone, all races where Hamilton looked like a shadow of himself. Then came Hungary, a track where he's won 8 times, where instinct and rhythm have always served him best. To see him out in Q2 by just 0.016 seconds, then fail to improve even a single position in the race, felt seismic. It wasn't just about performance, it was about identity. And when Hamilton told Sky Sports, "I'm useless, they probably need to change driver," the world heard more than frustration. They heard a man questioning whether he still belonged. The media seized on it. Retirement rumours surged. Fans debated whether the fire was still there. But the most significant reaction came from 2 places: Toto Wolff and Charles Leclerc. One, the former team boss who still sees potential. The other, the current teammate who could have fueled the fire, yet chose unity instead. That's what makes this story bigger than one race. It's not just about Hungary. It's about what Hungary revealed. A man at the edge, a team under pressure, and a championship dream hanging by threads of belief and memory. This is no longer just a title chase. It's a battle for identity, redemption, and the soul of a champion. The numbers don't lie, but they rarely tell the whole story. On paper, Lewis Hamilton's Q2 exit at the 2025 Hungarian Grand Prix was decided by just 0.016 seconds. That microscopic margin was all that separated him from the final qualifying group. But under the surface, the data reveals something far more troubling, something systemic. Telemetry from Ferrari's onboard sensors showed that Hamilton's corner entry speeds were consistently 3 to 5 km per hour slower than Leclerc's through turns 1, 5 and 13, critical sections where confidence in front-end grip is everything. That wasn't a setup issue. That was feedback, mistrust between driver and machine. And in modern Formula One, that disconnect is lethal. Ferrari's SF-25 has been notoriously sensitive to ride height changes, especially over curbs and low-speed apex transitions. While Leclerc has adjusted with a more aggressive turn-in style, Hamilton, still adapting to the nuances of Maranello's design philosophy, has struggled to find stability under braking. His brake migration settings, typically one of his strengths at Mercedes, seem mismatched to the Ferrari chassis, particularly under variable grip. And then there's the ERS deployment strategy. Ferrari split energy maps between the 2 drivers, giving Leclerc a more aggressive regen recovery setup suited to clean air. Hamilton, by contrast, was handed a conservation map to maximise flexibility during traffic stints. But that same map cost him straight-line delta, nearly 7 km/h down the main straight, according to Sector 1 data. The result? A car that felt heavy in traffic, lacked bite on turn-in, and bled time on the straights. That's not just frustrating, it's suffocating for a driver who made his name with late-braking overtakes and fearless traction exits. To compound the issue, Ferrari's tyre strategy boxed Hamilton into the worst possible window. After starting on used mediums, he was left out 3 laps longer than optimal while the undercut closed behind him. When he finally pitted, he rejoined behind slower traffic and was forced into lift and coast to manage tyre deg. No rhythm, no pace, no trust in the car. That's the recipe we saw in Hungary. And it's why, for the first time in a long time, Hamilton looked like he was fighting ghosts, not just the competition. Ferrari's strategy in Hungary wasn't just flawed, it was emblematic of a deeper issue plaguing Hamilton's 2025 campaign: reactive thinking in a sport that rewards anticipation. From the moment qualifying ended, Hamilton was boxed into a compromised race path. Starting on worn medium tyres from P12 meant he was locked into a tyre offset strategy that only made sense if there was early chaos or a safety car to flip the order. But this was Hungary, processional by nature and ruthless to those stuck in DRS trains. Ferrari's plan hinged on holding position early, extending the first stint, and executing a clean one-stop into clean air. But that plan collapsed by lap 14. By then, Oscar Piastri and Fernando Alonso had already triggered the undercut window, and Hamilton was bleeding time behind Esteban Ocon. The data showed he was losing 0.3 per lap in dirty air. Yet Ferrari delayed his pit stop until lap 19, 5 laps too late. That decision dropped him behind a slower Williams, effectively ending any chance of progress. More troubling, though, was the lack of adaptation. Ferrari didn't respond to real-time sector deltas. They didn't alter the energy deployment strategy or use Hamilton's second stint to test alternate settings. It was as if the strategy was written in stone before the race began, and no matter what unfolded, they refused to pivot. Compare that to McLaren's nimble racecraft or Mercedes' aggressive tyre offsets, and the gap in operational sharpness becomes stark. What's worse is that Hamilton sensed it. His radio messages, usually filled with feedback and intensity, were subdued, almost resigned. That silence wasn't tactical, it was emotional, a reflection of a driver who felt unheard by the pit wall and unarmed on track. And that disconnect between Hamilton and his strategy team is more than just a short-term concern. It's a signal that unless Ferrari recalibrates how it communicates and executes under pressure, they risk not just losing points, but losing the very driver they built their 2026 dreams around. And Lewis Hamilton didn't just lose track position in Hungary, he lost something far more personal: belief. For a driver whose career has been built on resilience, rhythm, and supreme self-confidence, Hungary felt like emotional freefall. After a demoralising Q2 exit and a lifeless drive to P12, Hamilton emerged from the car not angry but broken. His eyes stayed fixed on the ground, his hands fidgeted with his gloves. And when Sky Sports finally caught him for a post-race comment, he said the words no one expected: "I'm useless. They probably need to change driver." That wasn't just frustration. That was a man caught in a feedback loop of doubt, trapped between the desire to fight and the growing sense that the fight might be unwinnable. And here's where the human drama cuts deepest. Hamilton's not losing because he's slow. He's losing because he no longer trusts the system around him. At Mercedes, he had Bono. He had a car built to his instincts. He had a team that moved like a symphony around him. At Ferrari, the notes are dissonant, communication gaps persist. Set-up adjustments arrive late. And feedback, his most trusted weapon, is often dismissed or diluted in post-session reports. That kind of erosion isn't visible on a timing sheet, but it shows in the posture, in the tone of voice, in the hesitation during media interviews. When asked if he'd return after the summer break, Hamilton didn't say yes. He said, "Hopefully I will be back." That single word, hopefully, rang out louder than any engine on the grid. It was a glimpse into the psychological war he's fighting, not against Leclerc or Red Bull or the stopwatch, but against his own creeping disillusionment. And yet, here's the twist. In the midst of this unraveling, his teammate did something nobody expected. Charles Leclerc, who had every opportunity to assert dominance, refused to take the bait. "We're one team," he said. "It was a tough weekend for Lewis, but it's a one-off. I'm sure he'll bounce back." That quiet show of solidarity may have been the first moment of real emotional stability Hamilton's had all season. And in a pressure cooker like Ferrari, that kind of belief, however small, can be the difference between collapse and comeback. The 2025 title fight may no longer be Hamilton's battlefield, but his position in the championship tells a story just as compelling. After 12 races, Hamilton sits 6th in the drivers' standings, trailing his teammate Charles Leclerc by 42 points. That gap, while not insurmountable, is symbolic of the structural divide within Ferrari. One car appears in contention, the other is caught in a spiral, and more importantly, only one driver, Leclerc, has stood on a podium this season. In pure mathematical terms, Hamilton is no longer fighting for the championship, but that doesn't mean the numbers are irrelevant, because the bigger battle isn't for a title, it's for control over Ferrari's 2026 direction. Under the new regulations, development input from this year will directly shape the design and philosophy of next season's car. And in the Ferrari garage, influence is currency. Leclerc's consistency, podiums, and feedback are all being logged as indicators of setup leadership. Hamilton, on the other hand, has struggled to translate his feel into actionable gains. If that pattern continues, Ferrari could shift technical authority toward Leclerc, not out of politics, but practicality. And that matters. Because if Hamilton is to lead Ferrari into a new era and mount one final title push under the 2026 regulations, he needs more than speed. He needs technical ownership. He needs the engineers building around his driving style. And right now, every pointless finish, every Q2 exit, every missed debrief is another brick in the wall between him and that influence. Hungary, in that sense, wasn't just a bad weekend. It was a statistical fracture that could echo through Ferrari's long-term development cycle. And Hamilton knows it. Because beyond the pain and frustration lies a simple truth. If he can't reassert himself in the standings, Ferrari might not wait for redemption. They might pivot entirely, and in doing so, rewrite the very future Hamilton came to Maranello to shape. The Formula One paddock doesn't wait for anyone, not even a 7-time world champion. And as Hamilton falters, the rest of the grid is moving with precision and opportunism. McLaren has seized the moment with brutal efficiency. Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri are now firmly planted in the top tier of the constructors' battle, and every point Ferrari drops becomes their gain. But it's not just about pace, it's about narrative. In private briefings and post-race interviews, McLaren insiders have subtly shifted the conversation away from Red Bull dominance and toward Ferrari instability. The message is clear. We're the team on the rise. Ferrari is the team in conflict. And then there's Mercedes. Despite losing Hamilton, Toto Wolff's operation has found unexpected momentum behind George Russell's maturity and Kimi Antonelli's growing confidence. Internally, Mercedes views this transitional year not as a gap, but as a recalibration. While Ferrari continues to experiment with philosophy and driver hierarchy, Mercedes is building around clarity. But perhaps the most strategic response has come from within Ferrari itself. After Hungary, team principal Fred Vasseur was quick to downplay Hamilton's collapse. He's frustrated, not demotivated, Vasseur told the press. Sometimes drivers say things they don't mean after jumping out of the car. It was an attempt at insulation, shielding Hamilton from further scrutiny while buying time for internal repair. But make no mistake, the patience won't last forever. Ferrari's board expects results, and rival teams know it. That's why the pressure isn't just coming from within, it's being applied from all sides. Every time Hamilton is out-qualified, every time he finishes behind a customer team, the whispers grow louder. Has he lost it? Will he walk away? Is Leclerc the real future of Ferrari? The paddock feeds on weakness, and Hungary gave them a banquet. Yet in that chaos lies Ferrari's hidden opportunity. Because if Hamilton and Leclerc can rally, if they can project unity rather than division, they could flip the narrative from internal breakdown to strategic recalibration. But make no mistake, the rivals have noticed the cracks. And they're sharpening their knives for 2026. What happened in Hungary wasn't isolated. It was a stress test for what's coming, and the results were mixed at best. With the 2026 regulation overhaul looming just 18 months away, every race in 2025 has become a proxy battle for future influence. The shift to smaller, lighter cars, a more balanced 50-50 hybrid engine architecture, and simplified aero concepts promises to reset the hierarchy. And for Hamilton, it presents a potential lifeline. The more agile, driver-responsive design philosophy is tailor-made for his strengths: late braking, throttle modulation, and aggressive mid-corner corrections. But to capitalize, he has to survive 2025. That means more than just staying in the seat. It means clawing back confidence, rebuilding trust with Ferrari's engineers, and, perhaps most critically, fighting to make his voice central to the 2026 design process. Because if Ferrari's new chassis team, led by David Sanchez and Jock Clear, continues basing development on Leclerc's feedback, Hamilton could find himself in a car tailored to someone else's instincts, and that's a recipe for déjà vu. Remember 2022? That was the year Mercedes misunderstood their aero philosophy, and Hamilton spent half the season playing catch-up in a car that didn't listen to him. Ferrari cannot afford to repeat that mistake. But there's a wild card that could tilt the scales: unity. If Hamilton and Leclerc can genuinely align, they could present a united front to Ferrari's leadership, a dual feedback loop that accelerates understanding rather than splitting resources. Hungary, surprisingly, may have been the first crack in that barrier. Leclerc's public defence of Hamilton wasn't just sportsmanship, it was strategy. A signal that despite the gap in points and performance, he sees value in partnership. Because both drivers know that in 2026, it's not just about who's faster, it's about who's ready. And Hamilton, battle-worn, legacy-driven, desperate for closure, is already preparing for war. But preparation isn't enough. What happens next will depend on Ferrari's willingness to act. Will they recalibrate the car around Hamilton's feedback? Will they support his mental reset? Will they bet on experience over youth? The answers to those questions will determine whether Hungary was a breaking point or just the prelude to something extraordinary. Lewis Hamilton has faced storms before. He's lost titles in the final race. He's battled mechanical failures, team politics, and media scrutiny across nearly 2 decades at the pinnacle of motorsport. But Hungary 2025 was different. It wasn't just defeat, it was vulnerability laid bare. A champion who once seemed untouchable was suddenly questioning everything, from his confidence to his place in the sport. And yet, within that vulnerability lies the raw material of greatness. Because legacy in Formula One isn't built solely on victories, it's built on how drivers respond when the world thinks they're finished. And this, right here, right now, is Hamilton's crucible. The numbers are harsh. He's scoreless in 3 straight races. He's behind his teammate in every major metric. Ferrari is drifting away from his strengths. The public is whispering retirement. But one thing hasn't changed: Hamilton's fire. Even in the darkest post-race interview, even in that long, silent sit in the cockpit, there was still a flicker. "Hopefully I'll be back," he said. Not as surrender, but as a challenge to himself, to Ferrari, to the sport. Because 2026 isn't just another rule change, it's a final window, a reset of architecture, of philosophy, of opportunity. And if Ferrari gets it right, it might be the car Hamilton has waited 5 years to drive, but only if he can get there. Only if he survives 2025, not physically, but emotionally, psychologically, competitively. And he might not have to do it alone. Leclerc's unexpected loyalty after Hungary opened the door to something few thought possible: a united Ferrari driver lineup. 2 styles, 2 eras, 1 mission. To take back the crown. But as Fred Vasseur said, one moment, one microphone, one bad result, and everything explodes. That's the margin they're operating in. And it's why this summer break, far from being a vacation, might be the most important reset of Hamilton's career. When F1 returns at Zandvoort, the pressure won't be any lighter. But the narrative? That's still up for grabs. Budapest may have felt like the end. But for Lewis Hamilton, it could yet be the beginning of the redemption arc we never saw coming. And for Ferrari, it's a simple choice: build a car that listens, or lose the greatest driver of this era in silence.